Is everybody clear on what the motion is? So I'm going to give Emerson the first shot, and then I'm going to take in favor and against. So Emerson, would you like to speak to this motion, hopefully briefly?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And yes, I'll be brief. Just to reiterate what I said before, we allow the transfer of commercial quota among states for our other managed species. That has not presented any problems, and we keep really close track on accounting of our striped bass harvest, so that shouldn't be an issue. However, I do realize that it's probably not appropriate to allow a transfer between the Chesapeake Bay commercial quota and the coastal quota because we're working under two different F reductions.
Okay, who would like to speak against this motion? You have a question? Okay.
I'm speaking again.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I question the wording, and before we go too far down the trail here, if the wording shouldn't, if the mover and the seconder shouldn't take a second look at it and make sure that its wording is very funny, right, or peculiar the way it's written right now.
Can you be specific as to what is confusing to you? Because I see it as a fairly clear one, but.
Well, shouldn't it refer to coastal states and not between states and not, I mean, transfer amongst coastal states or commercial, I don't know. It's not my motion, but it just doesn't seem to.
Then move to amend to allow the commercial quota transfers among the coastal states commercial quota, but not between the Chesapeake Bay states quota and the commercial and the coastal states quota.
Did you get that change in his wording? Is everybody clear on the intent here that we are going to allow under this motion, if it was passed, you would allow transfer of quotas between the coastal states, commercial quotas. Do you have a suggested wording? Oh, yes, Bill, do you have?
You can simplify it to allow the commercial quota transfers only among the states with the coastal commercial quota, period.
David?
Yeah, I think what Bill just did helps a lot to clarify what we're doing, and I wanted to speak against this motion. I'm already very concerned that we're not going to get parity between recreational and commercial fisheries in terms of quota cuts, because the alternatives presented currently, and we'll address this in a couple of minutes, for commercial quotas cut 25% from the Amendment 6 allocation. And if you'll notice in the table, or remember from that table, our 2013 harvest on the coast was 2.5 million pounds. And if we implement the option B16 25% reduction from Amendment 6, we could end up with a 300,000 pound increase in commercial quota. So to allow transfers among states is going to exacerbate that problem. So picture North Carolina that has, would have under option B16 a 360,000 pound quota but didn't catch anything last year, transferring that whole load to a state that perfectly well could, like Massachusetts. And there you go, we have no reduction at all, and much more likely a significant increase in commercial harvest while the recreational fishery is taking cuts. We should not do this.
Sorry, I should have cut you off. Emerson, is this wording, Emerson, and are you okay with the wording that Bill Adler refined?
Yes, it means the same thing as what I had up there before.
Okay. Lauren, are you okay with that? Okay. Now, we've had one against. Is there somebody in favor? Anybody else want to speak against? David?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. My concern with this is exactly the same concern that David Simpson just raised. And keep in mind that I think that all of those people around the table that have spoken about the need for flexibility for the states to manage their commercial quotas and adjust, I totally align myself with that thinking. So that's kind of having position on both sides of the issue. And maybe what we should do is limit the amount of quota that could be limited. So we might put in here that you could only transfer not more than 25% of your quota, and that would provide a little bit of flexibility for the states to actually transfer and do the things that have been discussed. And yet, we wouldn't end up with 100% of the quota being caught, because that's just going to increase fishing mortality. Thank you.
Rob, are you speaking for or against it?
I'm speaking against it. Is that okay?
Sure.
Okay. To, pile on those last couple of comments, I think what we figured out was somewhere about 950,000 pounds is what is not being reduced in the coastal commercial quotas this time. We, as a group, did not get to any kind of conclusion on this at the August board meeting. The table that David references is really problematic, and so allowing transfers on top of that really doesn't make sense.
Anybody else? All right. Tom?
Yeah, I mean, when we had this discussion in August, I didn't think we should penalize the states that hadn't harvested because they were being more conservative. We don't basically penalize conservative, but I was not supporting the transfer. And just because of the reasons that David said, I mean, was a lot of excess fish that could have been caught and didn't be caught. And with the transfers, it could make it crazy because we spot fish in one area, and then all of a sudden all the focus becomes in that area. So I can't support this motion.
Dennis?
Thank you.
For or against?
Against.
Is it important that it seems like we have nobody in for. I'm not getting anybody that wants to speak in favor of it. So
Let's vote.
Okay. Do you need a caucus? All right, I'll give you 20 seconds to caucus. All right. This is a motion to amend to allow commercial quota transfers amongst the states with a coastal commercial quota. And this was a motion by Mr. Hasbrook and seconded by Mr. Lustig. Would you like me to read it again? Okay. Move to amend to allow commercial quota transfers only amongst the states with a coastal commercial quota. Thank you very much, Joe, for catching that. Okay.
We have a roll call, please.
Okay, a roll call vote. Mike?
Maine?
No.
New Hampshire?
No.
Massachusetts? No. Rhode Island?
No.
Connecticut?
No.
New York?
Yes.
New Jersey?
No.
Pennsylvania?
No.
Delaware?
No.
Maryland?
No.
DC?
No.
PRFC?
No.
Virginia?
No.
North Carolina?
No.
National Marine Fisheries Service?
No.
U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service?
No.
Motion fails 1 to 15. Now we have the underlying motion. You ready to vote on this? Okay. You want to roll? Okay. We've got a roll call vote again on this.
Maine?
Yes.
New Hampshire?
Yes.
Massachusetts?
Yes.
Rhode Island?
Yes.
Connecticut?
Yes.
New York?
No.
New Jersey?
Yes.
Pennsylvania?
Yes.
Delaware?
Yes.
Maryland,
Yes.
DC,
Yes.
PRFC,
Yes.
Virginia,
Yes.
North Carolina,
Yes.
National Marine Fisheries Service,
Yes.
U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service.
Yes.
The motion carries 15-1. Now we're going to move on to section 3.2, which is commercial size limits. Do we have a motion from the board? Paul Diodati.
Move to maintain all commercial size limits that were in use in 2013 fisheries.
Seconded by Mr. White. If you'd like to speak to it. Paul?
No. I just want to
Okay.
move on.
Anybody want to, is there any discussion on the motion? Yes, Adam?
How does this motion apply, Mr. Chairman? Should there be changes to the recreational fishery, since the document says that the existing size limits apply only if the board selects to change the size limits?
Let me try and clarify. So if the recreational size limit were to change, this motion would override the fact that the commercial size limit would also supposed to change to match that.
Any further discussion? Seeing none, I'll give you 20 seconds to caucus on this. You want a roll call? Okay. Mike, can you take a roll call vote?
Be happy to. Maine,
Yes.
New Hampshire,
Yes.
Massachusetts,
Yes.
Rhode Island,
Yes.
Connecticut,
Yes.
New York,
Yes.
New Jersey,
Yes.
Pennsylvania,
Yes.
Delaware,
Yes.
Maryland,
Yes.
DC,
Yes.
PRC,
Yes.
Virginia,
Yes.
North Carolina,
Yes.
National Marine Fisheries Service,
Yes.
U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service.
Yes.
Unanimous.
The vote carries unanimously. Now we're on to page 3, folks. We're on a roll here. Okay, now. All right, this is page 3. The first decision is on the coastal commercial. That's in page 15 of the document. Yes, David, do you have a motion? Okay, Dave?
Yeah, I consistent with the technical committee advice this morning, I think we need to base the reductions in the commercial fishery on the 2013 harvest as we are doing on the recreational. So my motion is just that, reduce the commercial quota by adjust the commercial quota to be 75% of the 2013 harvest, and to accomplish that, adjust not sure how to word this, but the intent would be to apply the Amendment 6, convert the Amendment 6 quotas into percentages, and to multiply those percentages times the coast-wide 2013, the 75% of the 2013 landings. I hope that's clear. So in other words, with most fisheries, we have each state gets a percentage allocation. So what I'm asking that we do is we turn the Amendment 6 quota table into percentages. So for example, Connecticut that gets 23,750 pounds, you would divide that by the coastwide total of 3,806,275 pounds, derive a percentage, and then multiply that by your new target to achieve the 25% reduction.
I am wondering, and I'm going to ask the PDT chair, is this not a measure that we already took out of the document? And are these quota levels in between what was contemplated in B16 and status quo. Because if it's not, then I'm going to rule it out of order, because it's not between the status quo and the items that were contemplated in the addendum. And I'll ask the plan coordinator, and I'd love to hear from the executive director on whether he feels this is the case.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Dave, in the previous version that the board reviewed before they sent the document out for public comment, there were commercial quota options that took the reductions from the harvest instead of the quota. The board made motions on that draft to remove those options before sending the document out for public comment, leaving only the option that's currently in the document, which is a reduction from the quota, not the harvest. Additionally, the option that you've made a motion about would be more restrictive than what we took out for comment because it was removed prior to taking that draft out.
Sure.
Yeah, so back when we were working on this in May or August, I forget which, we were very concerned that, for example, North Carolina would end up with no quota if we cut everyone based on 2013 landings. It would completely upend the Amendment 6 allocations. And I just don't think we gave it enough thought. How do we fix that and take it out to public hearing? And so what we've ended up with is an alternative that increases the commercial. What you're telling me is the range of alternatives includes only options that increase the commercial quota relative to 2013 instead of reducing it. And I don't believe that was the intent of this entire addendum. I believe the intent and the expectation of the public is what's good for us is good for them. And they're fully expecting the commercial fishery to take a 25% cut on the coast, just like the recreational fishery is. And if someone has a better way of doing this that's fair among the states, I would like to hear it, but I do not believe that it's out of order or inconsistent with the entire intent of this addendum.
I agree with you that the intent of this addendum was to take a reduction of 25% off the harvest. But the board, on several occasions in its previous meetings, removed options that would have done that. In fact, at the last meeting, there was a motion that was made to include another option that would have done that, and the motion failed. So I am going to rule this out of order because it does not fall between the status quo and what went out for public hearing. So that being said, is there another motion, Paul Diodati?
I'll move to take a 25% reduction in harvest from the commercial coastal Amendment 6 quota allocations.
Seconded by David Borden.
Speak to the motion.
Speak to the motion, Mr. Diodati.
I really wasn't involved in the discussion for some reason about removing the option of reducing the 2013 harvest. So I want to clear that up. I wasn't involved in that discussion, but looking at the landings data, it's pretty obvious that the states that are not landing their quota, they're zeroed out for a reason. Unless Lewis has a cure for global warming, and I don't think that's going to happen, it's unlikely that his fishery is going to turn around anytime soon. I'm sorry, Lewis. You never know. But so I think that the actual cuts that are achieved are going to be pretty consistent with what you see. It's going to be very close to the actual 2013, as if you were reducing the 2013 harvest rates. So at least that's my feeling. I know that in Massachusetts we have no problem harvesting our entire quota, and so taking a 25% cut off our allocation is a real 25% cut. So taking it off the 2013 harvest, we would have to subsidize every other state that didn't harvest, and we'd be taking closer to a 50% cut. So, so that's why I support this motion. I think it does what it's supposed to do, and if it doesn't, I'd be willing to revisit this in the near future. But I think it will do what it's supposed to do.
Further discussion on the motion, in favor or against? Against? Okay, Rob, why don't you speak against it, and then we'll take the motion to amend.
I think if we had done this correctly, and I know the background on all this because I did participate in the process, but we're looking to end up somewhere around 1.9 million pounds. And what Paul Diodati is suggesting is what I said earlier. It's probably a little more than 900,000 pounds, and that's more than just a little waiver from where it should be. To end up with a positive 13% increase, there has to be something available. I just don't know that it's going to fit in between what went out for public hearing and what we have here. So, for example, Dave Simpson could have taken a more than a 75%, or less than a 75%, I should say, from the Amendment 6 quotas. The only problem we still have is let's say it nicely, North Carolina. And certainly, I can't speak on how to fix that exactly, but 2013 and 2012 weren't the only years that North Carolina had a harvest. And I don't think I heard anyone through the process ask, well, since you can't take 25% of zero and end up with anything, now we have to reshuffle, which is what happened, which is why that table was moved out, and reallocate. But there certainly should have been some possibilities that North Carolina maybe could have supported that would, break this stalemate that we have. And I do hate to think that there's been such earnest attempts all the way around to arrive at the reduction as close as possible. Maybe 1 year and 7 weeks. I don't know what it'll end up being with the Bay's 20.5% reduction. But here we have a case that it's just sticking out like a sore thumb. And what can you do about that? And does it have to be done right now? Is it something that, earlier on, I think one of the ambitions of the Bay jurisdictions was that with the possibility of more than 1 year, it would get time to, remedy this, allow the commercial states on the coast to go forward with their harvest, and then make a modification for year 2, 2016. So, I know it's a tough situation, Mr. Chairman, but it's really kind of tough to see us not have spent enough time here, perhaps, on this particular issue.
John?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Given the discussion, this will not be popular, but I have a fairness issue. I'd just like to amend the main motion by putting in the wording, excluding from the reduction in commercial quota those states that did not receive a quota increase under Amendment 6. If I can get a second, I can just explain this pretty quickly.
Tom?
Yeah, for discussion.
Tom O'Connell seconded the motion. Go ahead.
Yes, I brought this up before. Delaware was the only state with a commercial striped bass fishery that did not receive an increase under Amendment 6. The median increase for the other states was about 44%. The total increase in the quota was over 50%. I can get into the history of all this, but I know it's late, so I just wanted to say that for a fairness standpoint, The other states will be taking 25% off a quota that, in most cases, they got at least 40% increases in their quota back under Amendment 6. Delaware has a small quota. It's only 5% of the coastal quota, despite the fact that recent evidence shows that Delaware is now producing 14 to 20% of the coastal migratory stock, Delaware Bay and River, that is. I just think it's a fairness issue that since we did not receive the increase, that we should not have to take the same cut that the other states are. We'll still be below where they would be had we gotten the 40% increase back under Amendment 6. So I'll just leave it at that. Thank you.
Further discussion on this motion to amend? Jim?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I think it's a little difficult. I understand where you're coming from, John, but I don't know what this means now, because we'd have to go back to Amendment 6 and look at who didn't get a quota increase, who did. And but in any event, I don't know what this means in terms of the bottom line numbers. So, and well, while I have the mic, well, I'll go back if we vote this down. I had a comment on the earlier motion. Thank you.
Further discussion? Okay, let's caucus for 10 seconds. Okay, Mike, can you take the roll call on this? Let me...
Yeah, because he's going to want it, yeah. Maine?
No.
New Hampshire?
No.
Massachusetts?
Yes.
Rhode Island?
No.
Connecticut?
No.
New York?
No.
New Jersey?
No.
Pennsylvania?
Yes.
Delaware?
Yes, yes, yes.
That only counts as one. Maryland?
No.
DC?
No.
PRFC?
No.
Virginia?
No.
North Carolina?
No.
National Marine Fisheries Service?
Abstain.
U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service?
Abstain.
Motion fails 3 to 11 to 2. Now we have the underlying motion here. Any further discussion? Seeing none, let's vote on this. Again, I'll give you 10 seconds. You do? What's the question?
So, Paul's motion is basically B16, right?
Correct.
Okay. Just help me understand what the range of alternatives are that we have. What's the lowest we can go on the commercial quote? I was confused that you found my motion out of order. This is the lowest we can go?
Yes.
This is basically the only thing we can do then, because we've already decided 25% and there's nothing else that can be considered. Is that? Unless we want to reallocate among states or something.
It is the most conservative option that this board elected to put in this addendum for the commercial, coastal commercial. Okay, I'm going to try to see, is there any objection to this motion? And if there is, we'll take a roll call. Yes, there is. Okay, roll call vote.
Maine?
Yes.
New Hampshire?
Yes.
Massachusetts?
Yes.
Rhode Island?
Yes.
Connecticut? Sure. How about I come back to you? New York?
Yes.
New Jersey?
Yes.
Pennsylvania?
Yes.
Delaware,
No.
Maryland,
Yes.
DC,
No.
PRFC,
No.
Virginia,
No.
North Carolina,
No.
National Marine Fisheries Service,
Abstain.
U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service,
Abstain.
Connecticut.
No.
The motion carries 8 to 6 to 2. We're now on, yes, Adam.
I was ready to move on and had a motion when you're ready.
Okay, go ahead. This is for coastal recreational, page 14. We have a choice between B1 and B9. Go ahead, Adam.
Well, Mr. Chairman, I move that the state submit for TC review and board approval conservation equivalency.
Yeah, from your quota.
I move that the state submit for TC review and board approval conservation equivalency proposals for 2015 that achieve the 25% and 20.5% reductions for the coastal and Chesapeake Bay recreational fisheries, respectively.
Adam, could I ask one thing? Because we're working right now just on the coastal recreational, according to this. This is coastal commercial. No, coastal recreational.
If you would like me to limit this motion just to that, Mr. Chairman, please remove the 20.5% and the Chesapeake Bay elements of the motion I read.
I would appreciate that. Thank you. Okay, is there a second to this motion? Tom O'Connell. Okay, discussion on this motion. I'm going to give Adam the first crack, and then I'll find out who's opposed and who's against.
Yes, thank you very much. Just to perfect that for conservation equivalency proposals for 2015, so that's in there. Should come after, there you go, thank you very much. Just briefly bring this motion forward for a couple reasons. One, per the earlier discussion we had about conservation equivalency, states are expected to come forward with proposals anyway. By selecting one of the proposals here tonight, I believe we're doing ourselves an injustice on two areas. One, we're setting an expectation with the public that all states are going to come back with that regulation exactly. If we go ahead and come forward with a proposal for a one fish limit, let's say, and most states come back with two fish conservation proposals, then you're going to have outcry from the public about why we're allowing that. Secondly, I believe the column that's in the table on the right-hand side that describes a specific percentage associated with each of the specific options would also serve to be misleading when our conservation proposals are going to come back at the 25% target and not the numbers that are higher, up to 31% in that column. Thank you.
I'd like to get an idea of who'd like to speak in opposition to it right now. One. Richie, tell me, do you keep an eye on this?
Dave, Paul.
Dave, Paul.
Jim.
Lewis.
Jim.
All right, just to make sure, I had Richie, Dave, Paul, and Lewis. Were there others that wanted to speak in opposition? Jim? All right, and Mark. And I'll be glad to get your question on it in a minute. Is there anybody who wants to speak in favor of it? Tom? Okay. Now, I'll take a question from Paul first, and then we'll go.
Actually, I'll pass because I suspect I'm going to hear the answer as you start to have the pros and cons. If not, I'll ask my question at the end. Thank you.
Richie, you were the first on the list for opposition.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Move to amend to option B3 for the coastal recreational fishery.
Seconded by Pat Kelleher.
And if I can speak to it, Mr. Chair.
Yep.
This clearly is the overwhelming majority of the public wanted this option, and this option does not restrict Adam for doing any kind of a conservation equivalency. So any state can come in with a 2 fish or 1 fish in conservation equivalency. So it doesn't restrict his ability to do that.
Okay, I'm going to take who's opposed to this. Tom, okay, and I'll get a question. Anybody else opposed to it? Jim?
Lewis.
John Clark. All right, now questions. Steve, you had a question about it?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. If B3 is chosen and the percentage reduction from harvest in 2013 is greater than 31%, we've been talking about 25% reductions. Would the conservation equivalency for that, when it's brought back, have to be greater than 31%? Because if we choose B3.
I think that is a decision that's part of it that we're going to have to make here once we make this decision here. I know there's a motion that somebody wants to make to clarify that at some point. So we'll be giving the TC that clarification. Since we haven't taken formal opposition in favor, I will let the maker of the motion modify it if he wants to, if the second will agree to it.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'll do a friendly amendment, if there's no opposition, to add that a conservation equivalency would be based on a 25% reduction.
Seconder, okay?
Yes, I'm feeling friendly, Mr. Chairman.
Okay. Since we haven't started debate, all right, now we have the motion finalized here, and Tom, you have a question, or are you going to speak one way or the other? Can you?
Well, I'm trying to figure out what's the difference between the two motions. All you're doing is sticking 32 inches in, 32 inches in there. That's a 31% reduction, but you're saying we can do 25%. It doesn't make any sense, and it's be confusing to the public. I mean, if you say it's going to be a 25% reduction, they understand that it's less complicated, and you can do whatever you want. Every state, as we know, can be more restrictive, as New York has been for many years, by being at 1 fish. Or do we have to change the slot limits in Maine? I mean, that's why I'm saying we're probably going to do the states that have, like Maine has logbooks, so they can do state-specific data, and they can do their 25% reduction on that. So does New Jersey have logbooks and information that we put together that probably is better than Mercer. I won't go there, but we'll say that we'll say that that's what it's supposed to be. So I think it's the same motion. That's why I can't really see the difference in the two motions. Maybe you could explain that to me, Richie.
Would you like to take a crack at explaining the difference?
If there's no difference, Tom, then I hope you'll support and vote for it.
Okay. Those who are in opposition to this motion. We got David. Jim? Okay.
Tom.
Tom's already spoken. Okay, they'll go with David first in opposition.
Thanks, Mr. Chair. We were fine with the motion before the perfection, I will say. But adding the conservation equivalency at 25%, I'm concerned it's going to undermine one of the most desirable features of striped bass management, and that has been consistency among states. And I know when states go back home, if they're faced with 1 at 32, which is probably, I'm going to guess, a 40% reduction, couldn't be calculated, but it's more than 31. I mean, you're adding 4 more inches to 28, and that's 31%. Or almost half of that by conservation equivalency, we're all going to go home and be under a great deal of pressure to do something different. Even if we don't, our neighbors will. And through the miracle of navionics, I just figured out that where we're sitting is 3.8 miles from New York and 3.4 miles from Rhode Island, and we're going to end up with 3 different sets of rules within a 3.5-mile radius of here. So I would be okay with B3, certainly, but not with the conservation equivalency.
Okay, somebody in favor of this? See, none, and I've got Jim and Tom who wanted to speak against this, I believe.
Well, since they made the, now
I
Davis.
said Jim.
Oh, okay.
Oh, you are? All right, well, but if you're in favor of this, then I guess you get to speak next.
Yeah, I reason, and because it's, as I said, one motion is not different from the other, so I could vote for either one because it allows for states of 25% reduction. And I know maybe Dave Simpson talks about, but our regulations have been different from New York since we put in the striped bass regulations from Dead One. Our regulations are different from Delaware because they have a different season in the bay that we don't take advantage of. And our regulations are different from Pennsylvania. So we have always had different regulations because it's what the state needs for its fishermen to participate. And that's what conservation equivalency is. And as long as we say with the 25% reduction is allowed, and we can accomplish that with anything we can do, then that's what we're supposed to be doing because we are here, and if I missed the last motion, we voted for a 25% reduction. And that's what we're supposed to be doing. So I'm in support of the motion as long as it allows for a 25% reduction.
Jim?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just quickly, and looking at this is the oddest conversation I think I've had in the 7 years I've been here, because usually we're arguing about reducing quotas. And then I completely applaud the folks at 1 at 32. I think it's a great thing. That option should be an option in doing this. We have to take a 25% reduction. A 1 fish at 28 is a 31% reduction, which is getting us more than what we need. So I'd be opposed to this because I think we're going well beyond where we need to go. But this does not preclude, if we went to the 1 at 28, an option of any state going to the 1 at 32 to be more conservative. Thank you.
Lewis?
Yeah, I got several problems here with all of this. First, I need the regulations in place by December 1 in order for me to account for my recreational fishery. And if we really do have the fish show up in January and February like we have in the past, which may not be likely, but it could happen, you know, we're not going to have these rules in place in time, and we can catch a lot of striped bass recreationally when they show up. You know, I'm still amazed that we haven't thought more about protecting the large broodstock fish. I mean, there's a few options in here for the slot limit, but just the sight of people coming in now with, if it's a 1 fish limit, with 8 40-pound fish on a charter that usually runs 3 a day when the fish are available, you know, that just seems crazy to me. So we're really not talking about anything that does anything to protect the big female fish. But I do have serious concerns about the 32-inch reduction, and I'm just wondering if everybody else, I mean, is everybody else thinking what I'm thinking, which is we're not really reducing the commercial fishery, but we're reducing the recreational fishery by 31+%. I mean, that's a huge discrepancy in what we're doing. I mean, by going with the Amendment 6, and I know that was the most conservative thing we had on the books, but that's an increase in their 013 harvest in the commercial fishery, and we're going to hit the recs with 31%. I think we're going to get creamed.
Anybody in favor? Okay. Let's caucus on this. I'm going to move to amend to option B3 for the coastal recreational fishery conservation equivalency based on 25% reduction. A motion by Mr. White and seconded by Mr. Kelleher. Second. Okay. Let's put it this way. Is there any opposition to this motion? Yep. Okay, roll call vote.
Maine?
No.
New Hampshire?
No.
Massachusetts?
Yes.
Rhode Island?
Yes.
Connecticut?
No.
New York?
No.
New Jersey?
No?
Pennsylvania?
Yes.
Delaware?
No.
Maryland?
No.
DC?
No.
PRFC?
No.
Virginia?
No.
North Carolina?
No.
National Marine Fisheries Service?
No.
U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service?
No.
Motion fails 3-12. We now have the underlying motion. Oh, Paul, excuse me.
I'm sorry, I forgot there was an underlying motion. Go ahead.
Hold on a minute, I misspoke. It's 3, the motion fails 3-13. Paul, did you want to speak?
Well, this, the main motion now, I guess that means we're going forward without any base, there's no standard for the coast with this motion?
Under the current motion, yes, you're correct.
So we just come in with whatever size limit and bag limit we choose and demonstrate that it results in a 25% reduction. So it just seems to me that that could be haphazard in terms of for a number of reasons and difficult to analyze the impacts of that sort of thing moving forward.
Is there any other? Yes.
Thank you. If we approve this, what would be a time frame for submittal of proposals, technical review, and approval by the board when we're not meeting again until February?
We have there's a motion that has been prepared to state that when that is, but we're essentially trying to get it in before, either by 2015, if that motion passes, the beginning of the year, or before the fishery starts.
Thank you.
And Bob?
Just a question. Since options B1 through B9 achieve at least a 25% reduction, could a state go ahead and implement those regulations without technical committee review, since they've already been, developed and reviewed by the plan development team and technical committee, or would they still need to be part of a conservation equivalency proposal?
The motion doesn't speak to that, because clearly we have those options in there. This only speaks to conservation equivalency as options, but clearly the states would have to have an implementation plan at a minimum.
Yeah, I guess I was just hoping to speed up the process, because if you have technical, if you submit a full conservation equivalency proposal, then it has to go to the technical committee, and there's multiple steps. But if you're just picking one off of the list, B1 through B9, and the plan development team chair, whoever can verify that state's proposal is consistent with these options, they can go ahead and implement that. And it's a much faster process than going through the tech committee review. So I'm just trying to see but I would also envision if a state wants to deviate from B1 through B9, then we would have to have conservation equivalency proposals approved by the technical committee and by the board.
Do you think we need that specifically in the motion, since this specifically says board approval of conservation equivalency proposals?
I mean, I think if the board is comfortable with that process, then that's fine. But I'm just suggesting another course that might work.
Okay, Adam?
I would offer two things. One, I would submit that since these were proposals that were reviewed by the TC and the board voted to include in the document under the 25% reduction, that they have met both of those. And I would also go on record with saying that the acceptance of B1 through B9 by a state meets the intent of the motion by the maker.
Without a conservation equivalency proposal, okay?
Correct.
Are we comfortable with it being part of the record? Dave?
Yeah, I'm uncomfortable, as I sensed Paul may be, with the lack of guidance that would help us achieve some consistency on the coast. And I can imagine the mishmash and how much fun it's going to be to figure out the PR vector on this one a couple of years from now, when everyone has radically different rules. More importantly, more of greater relevance to anglers is that desire to work toward consistency, and for that reason, I'm going to move to substitute option B1, one fish at 28 inches, and stipulate that any conservation equivalency proposals meet the 31% calculated reduction associated with one fish at 28. And I lost my train of thought after that.
Is there a second to that motion? Jim Gilmore.
Yeah, and if I could, this goes back to the struggle we had for a considerable amount of time on where do we really end up if the coast goes to 25 precisely and the bay goes to 20.5 precisely? Do we get our 1 year? This gets us 1 year, no doubt about it. I mean, no doubt about it. Achieves the calculated 50% probability of achieving our target within 1 year, and that's why I think it's important to let's get specific and let's try to stay on the same page with striped bass in terms of regulations to the extent we have currently. So thanks.
Tom?
We are being disingenuous. We just voted on the 25% reduction, and now because you're picking out one fish at 28 inch, you're basically saying we have to have a 31% reduction, which is 6% greater than what we voted on and we went out to the plant. I mean, this makes no sense whatsoever. I understand Dave's saying that he wants to be consistent, but we just sat here and saying Maine is not consistent, New Jersey is not consistent, Delaware is not consistent, Pennsylvania is not consistent, and I don't know what other states are doing, but I can at least name 5 states right there. So this is disingenuous to the public, and it also does not leave the flexibility for the states that have to handle different types of responsibility in their state to look out for what happens in their state. He might be perfectly acceptable for his fishermen to have one fish at 28, and that's great. Let him go for one fish at 28. But we have to accommodate the fishermen in our state, both the charter boat, party boat, and the recreational guys, and the guys that fish from the beach. And we need that flexibility as long as we make the 25% reduction. And I didn't vote for a 31% reduction. I don't think anybody around this table voted for a 31% reduction. So I think these motions are out of order.
Who would like to speak in favor of this? Anybody else want to speak against it? Okay, we will now caucus for 10 seconds. Okay, are we ready to vote here? Do you need more time? Not seeing anybody waving their hand. I'm going to take a roll call vote on this because I don't think it'll be unanimous. Mike?
Maine?
Yes.
Pen's running out. New Hampshire?
Yes.
Massachusetts?
No.
Rhode Island?
No.
Connecticut?
Yes.
New York?
More time.
New Jersey?
No.
Pennsylvania?
Yes.
Delaware?
No.
Maryland?
No.
DC?
No.
PRFC?
No.
Virginia?
No.
North Carolina?
No.
National Marine Fisheries Service?
No.
U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service?
No.
Coming back to New York?
No.
The motion fails 4-12, so we have the underlying motion now. Joe, do you need me to read the underlying motion? No? Yes? Paul?
I'd like to make another substitute motion.
Go ahead.
I'd like to move to approve option B1, one fish at 28 inches.
Bob, is this close enough that we'd have to rule it out of order, or is it significantly different because it doesn't include the 31% standard? But, yeah, I don't have a second yet. I was just trying to get whether I'm going to rule it out.
You want me to answer your question, or do you want to get a second? I think the motion needs to specify what the intent is with relationship to conservation equivalency. The previous motion said 31%. If this one means, if the intent of this motion is 31% also, then it's an identical motion. If it's something different at 25%, then I think it's substantially different and it would be in order.
So as this motion, Paul, do you want to?
Then I would perfect it to say that move to substitute, to approve option B1, one fish at 28 inches, with all conservation equivalent measures equaling a 25% reduction in harvest.
Seconded by Pat Kelleher. Would you like to speak to it?
I think this is much more consistent with what we've been dealing with today and what actually went out to public hearing in the addendum. These are questions that came up with some individuals at our public hearings that I had, and I just assumed that if it was going to be a 25% reduction, then that's what we would be targeting for conservation equivalency, not if it wasn't, then maybe we would have instructed the TC to just come up with those measures that equal the 25% reduction. We didn't do that. We gave them the flexibility, and they came up with measures that were close, but not quite 25%. And if we don't have this option, I actually agree with some of what Tom Foti said earlier, that it would eliminate perhaps many important options for certain segments of our fisheries, particularly the for-hire fishery. So that's why I'm making this motion.
Would anybody else like to speak to this motion? Adam, are you for or against?
I'll speak against, Mr. Chairman. Shall I go ahead?
Go right ahead, Adam.
Very briefly, earlier we heard the comment that people want to make this fishery in their own image. And it seems at this point we're just going through the list of the options when we're going to have the conservation equivalent options anyway, and if that's the direction we're going to go, then I would encourage this board to look at doing away with conservation equivalency in this plan sometime in the future anyway.
Anybody want to speak in favor of it? Jim?
Thank you, Chairman. This, I think, does exactly what we need to do. It gets us, I think we need to walk out of the room with some standard. This is a standard number for all the states to deal with. We can deal with conservation equivalency over the next few months, and this essentially accomplishes everything we need to do under the addendum. So I support the motion.
Anybody else against? Okay, seeing none. We're going to move the question here. Mike, do you need time to caucus? Everybody? Okay, Joe, I'll read it. Move to substitute to approve option B1, one fish at 28 inches with all conservation equivalent measures equal to a 25% reduction in harvest. Motion by Mr. Diodati and seconded by Mr. Kelleher. Yes?
Is that equal to 25% or more, or 25%, period?
The intent was 25% or more, so thank you. I'm willing to perfect that if the seconder is willing.
Just for clarification. Yeah. It's also in the meeting minutes. I think we need to vote on this.
Are you going to read it again?
Yeah. Okay. Move to substitute to approve option B1, one fish at 28 inches, with all conservation equivalent measures equal to a 25% or greater reduction in harvest. Motion by Mr. Diodati. Okay.
All right.
Okay, take the roll call, please.
All right, thanks. Maine.
Yes.
New Hampshire.
Yes.
Massachusetts.
Yes.
Rhode Island.
Yes.
Connecticut.
Yes.
New York.
Yes.
New Jersey.
No.
Pennsylvania.
Yes.
Delaware.
No.
Maryland.
Yes.
DC.
Yes.
PRFC.
Yes.
Virginia.
Yes.
North Carolina.
Yes.
National Marine Fisheries Service.
Yes.
U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service.
Yes.
Motion passes 14-2. Now we have it as the main motion. Is there any objection to the main motion? Seeing none, it's a unanimous vote in favor. Okay. It is almost 7:30. Do we want to keep plugging? We have 2 more sections to do, the Bay recreational and the Bay commercial. Rob?
If there's a will to continue, I have a motion for the Chesapeake Bay jurisdictional recreational fisheries.
I'm willing to keep going. Go ahead, Rob.
The motion would be similar to what Adam Nowalski made, and I'll read it. Move that the Chesapeake Bay jurisdiction submit for technical committee review and board approval conservation equivalency proposals for 2015 that achieve a 20.5% reduction in the Chesapeake Bay jurisdictional's recreational fisheries. And if I can, I think at this time, we don't have something that fits that, just as the coastal had several options. And the reason is that although there's a 2-year situation, what's in the plan, the addendum, is really for 1 year and 3 year. So that we will need to not only have the conservation equivalency, we'll also need to have those results, run so that we know exactly what we can end up with. So if you look in the document, for example, you can see that for the 17% reduction, that it's certainly on C4 describes a 20-inch minimum at 22%. Well, probably that's not going to quite be the same thing for a 20.5% reduction, but we don't know yet as far as we stand right now. But certainly C4 was a favored option, both at the advisor level and also from the Bay jurisdiction. So that's where we stand, and thank you.
So is there a second to this? Tom O'Connell? I'll take it that was your discussion in favor of the motion, Robert?
That was.
Okay. Speaking against it? Question?
Question for the, thank you, Mr. Chair. Question for the maker of the motion. Since we already approved a motion that requires Chesapeake Bay to have their regulations in effect for the 2015 fishing season, I would ask Chesapeake Bay how they would do that to come back to this board in February and then implement regulations prior to the fishing season.
Tom? Rob, you want to do it? Okay.
I will respond. So it depends when the fishing seasons start, and in Maryland it's about mid-April, PRSC the same way. DC is May, Virginia is May, and that's only a trophy fishery starting up May 1. So I think we'll have time to go through the process. What we like about the conservation equivalency approach is that it brings a chance to those who are on advisory panels and in the public to look at this suite of approaches. I hope that addresses your question.
Do you have a follow-up to that?
Follow-up, Mr. Chair, if I may. So you're saying, when you say May, you're indicating that if the technical committee approves it and the board approves it in February, you will have the regulations in place prior to the fishing beginning. That
is what you said, and I agree with it. We have a regulatory process at the Virginia Marine Resources Commission. We usually take 2 months, a discussion month and then a final month to pass a regulation. We certainly can do that in 1 month as well. So yes, we can satisfy that request.
One more.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Will the Bay be providing a technical committee with more than one option in the case that that option does not pass muster with the technical committee?
The Bay certainly can, although it is our hope, since we've been meeting quite frequently, that we can have some unified approach, and that's really the goal.
There's a question about the motion from the PDT chair.
Rob, I just wanted to be clear, because there is a distinction for the Bay options between 2012 and 2013. So is this reduction from 2012 or 13?
The reductions are supposed to be either from the 2012 harvest or the 2013 quota. We haven't crossed that situation yet. So the 20.5 will be from either, is the way that's presented. Is that your question? What is established by the board, that will be the 20.5% reduction.
So do you plan to do that in a separate motion?
We've been going through this decision tree, and I haven't heard any finalization as to which of those two bases that we're going to take our reduction from. We have promoted the 2012 harvest at the previous boards.
You have a specific option, C8, that takes the reduction from the 2012 harvest, or D. All the other ones are reductions from the 2013 harvest.
Yes, if I may, C4 through C6 could lend themselves to the 2012 harvest. C7 through C8 could lend itself to the quote, obviously, it states that. But none of those at this time are certain to achieve the 20.5% reduction, because in the C area, that's based on 17% applied in the first year and then coming to fruition by the third year. So that's why the conservation equivalency is important. But I'm intrigued by the question from the PDT chair on where these reductions are supposed to start from.
Rob, when the TC reviews the conservation equivalencies to see if they're equivalent, I'm asking, what are they equivalent to? A 25% reduction from 2012 or 2013? Excuse me, 20.5% reduction, sorry.
Thank you for clarifying that. It would be a 20.5% reduction from the 2012 harvest. Was that a long time that had to get to?
It's late, I understand.
Okay. So we have a motion and a second. Is there further discussion? Tom Foti.
I'd just like clarification. This is for the striped bass under the harvest control model. This is not for the coastal migratory stock that you harvest, because that sets to have a 25% reduction.
Rob?
That is correct. Does not include the coastal migrants. However, as mentioned in August, the harvest control model is sleeping right now, and we're resting on what happened a few years ago as we go forward, and we hope to wake up the harvest control model at some point in the future.
Further discussion on this motion? Seeing none, we'll give you 10 seconds to caucus on this. People need more time? Is everybody all set? I'm going to try this. Is there any objection to the motion or abstentions to the motion? Seeing none, the motion passes unanimously. We're getting close here, folks. And I appreciate your diligence in this. All right, now we're down to the Chesapeake Bay commercial. Rob?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'd like to make a motion that there would be a 20.5% reduction from the 2012 commercial harvest. That reduction would be applied and set before 2015 seasons. In Virginia, we do start early. We start January 15th. So this, in fact, will be decided in December by our commission. And for the other jurisdictions, I can't speak to their timing, but at least that's the Virginia jurisdiction.
Tom?
Yeah, I'll second the motion, and I can comment. If you, Maryland has the authority to put this in place by January 1st, by the time our fishing season begins as well.
Okay, that was second, and just so that we're consistent, can PRFC tell us about their implementation ability on this?
Yes, Mr. Chairman, we can initiate by order, so we can do that in a timely manner as well.
Thank you. Paul?
Could I just get some clarification again about why 2012 and, give us an idea of what the landing values were in that year versus 2013?
Yes, certainly. It's in the white paper, which I can pull out, but the clarification is that for the 2013 season, we enacted a 14% reduction based on our interpretation of the exploitable stock biomass that, the year class strengths that form that exploitable stock biomass had been average to below average, and the Bay jurisdictions took a 14% reduction. So for that reason, we asked back in June, I think it was, not to use 2013 harvest year, and then in August we asked to use the 2012 harvest that was added to the addendum. The difference is probably what I recall 300,000 pounds total for the Bay. I'd be happy to start digging and can share that in a few moments. But the basis is that even with the 2013 quota, to use that, that represents a 14% decrease as well. So I think overall, and I was just asked by Mr. O'Connell as well, but overall, there's probably a toss-up on the recreational side. On the commercial side, there's probably a 300,000 pound difference between 2012 and what the 2013 quota reduction would be. But I hope that everything that we have applied into our informative white papers for 2 board meetings give a pretty good explanation of the proposal for 2012.
Further discussion on this motion? Okay, seeing none, I'm going to give you 10 seconds to caucus. Okay, the harvest, according to, just in case people want to know specific numbers, in 2012 was 3.9 million, and you apply a 20.5% reduction, it'd be about 3.1 million. Yes?
Question for the technical committee. Does this meet the spirit of the motion that we first passed that said the Bay had to reduce mortality by 20.5%?
Yeah, the motion was a 20.5% harvest reduction. So this is achieving a 20.5% harvest reduction from 2012.
Okay. I'm going to, Dave?
Yeah, well, our smidge is turning into a smudge, to borrow Craig's term. So, and we did this for the recreational, but I thought what we had agreed was that we would all reduce from 2013 harvest. Did we not? 20.5% from 2013? No? Okay. So just bear in mind that the coastal recreational states will probably be going to something like a 31% reduction, and the Bay states will be doing about a 6% reduction, and that will put us even further from our goal of achieving at least a 25% reduction in year one. So just let's not kid ourselves that we're, you know, getting closer to that 1 year that we spent about an hour and a half obsessing over the approximate or almost. We're getting further and further from that, just so everybody is clear.
Boy, for something that we said we had no more questions on, no more debate on, we were caucusing here, and we're already, we're continuing to debate. So I'm going to start taking for and against again. Okay, who is in favor of this? Rob.
Certainly in favor, but I want to respond to some of the information I heard, because it has been a long time since June, but in June, the request was made by Dr. Daniel to remove the 2013 harvest as a basis for reduction for the coastal commercial fisheries, and at that same meeting, I made the motion to remove the 2013 harvest basis. So that's why that's not part of this right now. The other concern I have is a comparison with a coastal commercial situation, which is now going to be 13% increase by virtue of our actions, to compare that with what the Chesapeake Bay jurisdictions are doing. I'm not finding fault, by the way, I'm just trying to explain. So I hope you'll understand that. So the Bay jurisdictions are using 2012, again, because going into 2013, the quota itself was reduced by 14%. And the harvest certainly responded even more than that, you know, as far as that goes. In 2012, not all the quota was realized, of course, because we've got these ITQs and ITWQs, and I don't think the Virginia quota has been realized commercially in the Bay probably since around 2005. So not everyone is using their tags for whatever reason. So the only reason I'm saying this, I think that, you know, in the Bay, we owe it to explain that we do keep with the spirit of the addendum, and in June, there was a conscious decision by the board to make an allowance, and then again in August to allow the 2012 harvest. So I just wanted to assure everyone that, you know, it's still going to be pretty close. It's not going to be that much different. When you take 20.5% from commercial fishermen, you take their tags right away on an individual basis, it carries some weight, no pun intended. So,
against? Adam.
I'll go one step further, Mr. Chairman, and I move to amend, replace 2012 harvest with 2013 quota.
Is there a second to this? Richie White. Discussion on the amended motion. Tom O'Connell.
Yeah, it's, you know, Rob made a lot of points, but, you know, for a lot of points I made up earlier, so we're looking at a coastal commercial fishery that interacts with primarily large female fish. Decision's been made to allow that fishery to operate at higher levels in 2013. And even if the fishery, if the performance is like previous years and North Carolina doesn't catch their fish, that reduction is still far under 25%. The Bay states have been managing this fishery proactively, took a 14% reduction in 2013. We feel like 2012 is a good reference point. As Rob said, it's not a big difference, but given the fact that our commercial fishermen are going to be hit with a 20.5% reduction on primarily a male-based fishery, we think that this is a reasonable request for 2012. And I ask for to vote down this amended motion. Thanks.
In favor? Dennis Abbott?
Actually, I'm not in favor, but I just need some clarification, if I may.
From the PDT or from the maker of the motion?
Probably from either Rob, I guess.
Okay.
This morning, when I was looking at Table 2 on page 23 of the document, I was looking at the overall Chesapeake Bay quota, and I did see the reductions that were imposed upon you, and then I looked at what you actually caught, and from my quick math figures, I saw that you were, every year for the past 6 years, you did not catch the quota, and you average being under by about 22%. So my question is when all is said and done, could you explain to me how we will actually achieve a reduction, if that's clear enough, Rob?
The reduction will be from 2012, we hope. If it's from the 2013 quota, we don't hope for that. But in any case, it's still a reduction, especially for the commercial fishery. I think what we haven't talked about is when we had the transferability of quota, for good or for bad, the Chesapeake Bay jurisdictions have never transferred quota. We start each season with our own allocation, and we have stayed well within the guidelines, which are the Bay-wide quota. So, Mr. Abbott, as you go through that, what you don't have, of course, is 1997 forward in that table. And, so from that time until now, we have been underachievers. I think I mentioned before with the recreational fishery, they certainly were overachievers for 4 years in Virginia till it started to get a little bit puzzling. And as a matter of fact, the response to our regulation changes didn't really track until about 2007. There is a bit of the economic influence here that we don't talk about a lot, but certainly on the recreational end of the quota, we certainly heard it in Virginia at our public hearings that things had fallen off quite a bit. So that has rebounded a little bit, somewhat, 20%, but it's not like it was back from 1997 to 2006. So I think that's probably a lot of information, but the clearest information is the reduction will occur. It occurs statistically with the recreational fishery. We don't have the option yet because it's a 2-year process instead of a 1 or 3. The commercial fishery, no matter what we do, whether it's 2012, which we hope as the basis, or 2013, that's a forfeiture of tags right away. Again, what I'm worried about is this 11th hour and the fact that our promotion of this type of approach to our management started with the board in June, and now we're in our 3rd meeting, and there are some questions that we really thought we had addressed earlier.
David, are you speaking for or against this?
I actually just needed my memory refreshed if they could possibly bring up the motion that we passed where we adopted the 25% cut for the coast and 20.5% for the bay. If I could just see that, it would help me a lot. It didn't have a year in there after all the time we spent on it?
It didn't specify a year of which the reduction would occur, but for the coast the coastal options, the only option was to take it from 2013 harvest. But because of the harvest control model in the Chesapeake Bay and the fact that they were adjusting for the decrease in exploitable biomass, the board included an option to take it from 12 harvests as opposed to 13 quota because they had already taken a 14% reduction from 2013 quota.
So I appreciate you bringing that up. So move that prior to the 2015 season, jurisdictions implement rules to achieve the new mortality target by implementing a 25% reduction in harvest in coastal fisheries and a 20.5% reduction in Chesapeake Bay fisheries. And everyone around this table understood that we were talking about different years? I sure didn't. Can we pick our, I won't be sarcastic, it's late. I did not think we were talking about different baselines. So that's maybe an opportunity I missed. Maybe everybody else understood we were working off a different baseline.
Louis Daniels.
Yeah, that was my understanding was that the coastal commercial harvest would be reduced based on Amendment 6 quota. And that results in about a 13% increase over the 2013 landings. I don't know what that does to the 2012 landings. So for the Bay, they don't have it. I don't guess you have an Amendment 6 quota. So there is no way to use that for the Bay reduction. And the fact that they had been proactive and included a reduction in their year 13, using 213 is a double whammy for the Bay. So they're getting the 14%, heaped on the 14% that they voluntarily took, they're going to take another 20.5%. So you're going to have the Bay states taking a 35% reduction, and the coastal commercial is going to have about a 13%, the potential for an increase in their quotas from 2013.
Walter?
I think Mike just mentioned this, but what went out to public hearing? What was in the document that went out for public hearing?
Both options of taking the reduction from 2013 quota in the Bay or 2012 harvest went out for public comment.
Rob?
I hope David Simpson doesn't mind me saying this, but when we promoted the 2012 harvest, it was David that supported it and made a comment that because of the ITQ fisheries that really made sense. So, you know, I know we all deal with a lot of information, but, you know, I think that, you know, it's been well schooled through the board, and Lewis's comments are right on target.
Further comments from the board? Okay. I'm not going to take any more questions or comments on this, even if you come up with one afterwards. So please caucus. Okay, I have a feeling we're going to need to take a roll call vote on this. Go ahead, Mike.
Maine?
No.
New Hampshire?
No.
Massachusetts?
No.
Rhode Island?
No.
Connecticut?
No.
New York?
No.
New Jersey?
Yes.
Pennsylvania?
Yes.
Delaware?
No.
Maryland?
No.
DC?
No.
PRC?
No.
Virginia?
No.
North Carolina?
No.
National Marine Fisheries Service?
No.
U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service?
No.
Motion fails 2-14. Now we have the underlying motion. Do you need time to caucus on this? Not seeing much caucusing going on here, so. Are you ready, Mike?
Ready.
All right.
Maine.
Yes.
New Hampshire.
Yes.
Mass.
Yes.
Rhode Island.
Yes.
Connecticut.
Yes.
New York.
Yes.
New Jersey.
Yes.
Pennsylvania.
Yes.
Delaware.
Yes.
Maryland.
Yes.
DC.
Yes.
PRC.
Yes.
Virginia.
Yes.
North Carolina.
Yes.
National Marine Fisheries Service, sorry.
Yes, and your first beer's on me.
U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service.
Yes.
Motion carries unanimously. Now, we got one more motion, and that's the implementation plan motion. Actually, two more. We still have to approve the whole addendum. Now, go ahead, Dave.
In my now brain-dead state, I'm going to make a motion, and if it makes no sense, somebody tell me. So I move for an implementation date of January 1, 2015, and that we move that I move to submit conservation equivalency proposals by December 1, 2014, for technical committee review the first week of January 2015, and board review and action at the February meeting in 2015.
Is there a second to this motion? Jim Gilmore, discussion on the motion. Go ahead, Representative Peake. Well, I'm going to let, okay. Any discussion on this motion? I'm going to give you one last chance, because once we go to vote, okay. Russ?
I'd just like to offer up a friendly to change that to January 1st. For technical committee review, I just don't see us getting anything done in a month. I mean, we're talking next week is start putting something together, so that would be very, very tough to do.
Mike?
Yeah, the reason for a December 1st submission was to give our technical committee time to review these proposals in time to make a judgment so that it could be included in the board materials for the February meeting for the board. So if you want to push it back, that's at the board's will, but just know that your technical committee is going to get less time to review the proposals.
And I would see, clearly if you're going to be coming up with a conservation equivalency proposal that is something based on something outside of what was in the document for recreational fishing, then that might take a little bit longer, but it is a month that you'd have to do to put it together. John, and then Richie.
Just a question on the conservation equivalencies. This would include, for example, our slot size limited fishery in the river and bay. We'd have to come up with the equivalents for that also by December 1st, as well as just the regular coastal recreational.
Yes. Richie?
Didn't we already vote in a motion that January 1, 2015 implementation? Didn't we already have that in a motion? It was second motion, I thought. Prior to the fishing season beginning, 2000. Okay, so this is consistent with that. We don't need to add that in. That's already a part of this. So a state couldn't start their fishing season if they wanted to do conservation equivalency, and their fishing season started prior to February. They're one fish 28 inches.
Bob?
What we've sort of traditionally done is set in an implementation date, which is the effective date of the addendum. And the But the language in the original motion, which says you have to have everything in place prior to your fishery, is still allowed. So if you don't have a fishery that begins until April 1st, the regulations don't have to be in place January 1, but the reference points and other provisions such as no coastal commercial transfers and the other issues that you've gone through today, those are in effect on January 1st, 2015. But the regulations that control the fishery don't have to be in place until your fishery begins.
Okay, are there any further questions, comments, discussion? Last one. Okay, I'm going to try this. Is there any objection to the motion? Okay, we will vote on it. Do you want a roll call on this? Any objection to that? Okay, all those in favor, raise your hand. Also. 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15. Yeah, 15. Opposed? 1. Motion carries 15-1. Yes, Bill.
Is it time for a motion to accept the addendum as modified today?
Yes.
Then I so make that motion.
Seconded by everybody. Let the record hear that. All right. Let's see. Round and round it goes. Lord, I saw you first. Okay. Is there any objection to this motion? Thank you very much. Even though this is a final action, but we have a unanimous vote. It's a unanimous vote. Okay, I'm buying. Thank you all very much for a very long, arduous meeting.
Everyone, before everyone takes off, sorry to interrupt you. Go ahead and finish.
No, I just want to thank, number one, the PDT. I want to thank all the board members and such here on this. This was a tough battle. I think we came up